Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today on Broken Journey, the podcast. I am your host, Elba Rivera, and today I'm going to be talking about empty nesting. What is empty nesting? Empty nesting is when you no longer have children that you raised in your household. That's basically it. Um, so I was scrolling through social media and I saw that my friend and her husband are now empty nesters. And so they were out on a dinner date and, she had a whole bunch of hashtags and one of them was empty nesters. And I started laughing. I was like, how cool. She was like, I can't wait for this to happen. I'm so anxious, blah, blah, blah. Right. And then, for some people, actually, it's not the same, the excitement of being an empty nester, right? We as parents, we raise our kids and we sacrifice so many things to make sure that they are okay and that, things for them are better than what they were for us as children, right? And then one day to the next, they're gone and they're living their lives and they're doing their own thing. So I just want to talk a little bit about that and how my process of empty nesting was, right? Because it took some time for me to kind of deal with the situation. And I think mainly because at the time there was a lot going on. There was a lot going on for me. And so it was a little difficult, I will say myself. But yeah, I when the situation happened, it was my son. So now I have two children. I have a girl and I have a boy. And my daughter is actually older than my son. But he was the first one to move out. And he decided that he was going to go and get an apartment with his girlfriend. And so he was the first one that left. And so I'm like, okay, I still have one child with me. But, obviously I had to prepare myself mentally because I knew that eventually she was going to want to, leave as well and, create her own life, right? So when the time came, I was actually separated from my spouse at the time. And so, she decided that she was going to move out and she got her own apartment. I mean, she wasn't too far from me, but, it was still a transition because when I got home, I was home alone. So it kind of was a little difficult for me to kind of deal with the process because first my son left, then I had a separation. So after the separation, it was only my daughter and I living in the house. And then she decided to get her own place and, do her own thing, which, you know what? I am very proud of both of them for doing things, the right way and, creating their life. They weren't like teenagers when they moved out. They got themselves a job, went to school and things like that. So, definitely proud mama moment, right? And now my spouse and I do not have kids together. Actually, he doesn't even have any kids. My two kids are from a previous relationship. And so, I was a single mom for a while and nothing. So, raising as a single mom, it was a little hard, to raise two children. And I'm not going to say that their father wasn't there financially. I will give him credit. It wasn't a lot of money. Um, However, he did his monetary due diligence, if I would say. And the same thing when it came to being there for them. Now, we moved from New York to Florida. And, obviously he can't pick them up every other weekend. But he also did not pull his weight when it came to, taking the kids and, for the holidays and things like that. And so I do give him credit for, you know, the child support that they received. And again, it wasn't a lot, but it was something, right? Something is better than nothing. And so I will give him credit for that. He would occasionally pop up and, come and visit the kids and stuff like that. And so I will give credit where credit is due. But, being a single parent on the other side in a different state, it was very hard on me because I had to deal with them financially. Most of the bulk of the finances were coming from me, emotionally, and dealing with them in all different kinds of aspects, dealing with, the younger years. And when we moved here, my kids were going into teenage years. So those of you who are parents know that teenage years are the hardest years. So, it was a little difficult for them, and I definitely understand the transition was not easy. But after dealing with living through the traumas of 9/11, it was very difficult, and I really wanted my kids to experience something different in life. And so I came to Florida and I came to visit family, and I thought it was a great place for me to continue to raise my children. And I'm grateful that I was able to do the transition from living in New York to coming to living in Florida, which is definitely a culture shock. It's different. It's not the same, but we were blessed. We were blessed in many ways to be able to at least have family here, have support, and things like that. So for that, I'm always grateful for. And then, anyway, to go back into the topic of empty nesting, so my daughter moved out. I was separated from my boyfriend, and then it was just me and my dog. Basically, every single night. So I would go to work. At the time, I was working at the office. Right now, because of COVID and stuff like that, we are actually working from home. But at the time, I would go into the office, and when I would come home, I would sit down and it was so quiet. I wasn't used to it being that quiet that I really didn't know what to do with myself. I was like twiddling my thumbs, sitting down, watching TV, kind of like undecided about what I wanted to do with myself. I started a side hustle business a while back prior to the empty nesting. And I couldn't even focus on that. I was just focused on, dang, it is so silent in this house, which I'm not used to. I'm used to either the door closing and opening, going to the bathroom, going here, going to the kitchen, going to the cabinets. Those kind of things that, people have, when you have multiple people at home, right? And so again, for me, it was a little hard. It was difficult for me to deal with, my kids not being home, me having a separation, me dealing with just sitting there doing nothing. And I had to learn how to say, okay, you need to get up. You need to occupy your time. Because when you think about it, when you're raising children and you are a parent, obviously, you push all your stuff to the side to make sure that your children have what they need, right? And I was a busy mom. I was working, and then there were some times in the summertime I would take my son to football practice early in the morning on a Saturday when I really wanted to sleep in. And I would take him to so many different areas. Sometimes it was an hour and a half from the house, or 30 minutes, and then 45 minutes, and then I would have to sit around and of course I enjoyed watching my son play football. and stuff like that, But again, my daughter going to work, and at the time, you know, if she didn't have her car, I was driving her back and forth and things like that. And then, just I guess everyday schedule, I know that there's moms who have probably more than what I have when it came to scheduling sports. My daughter was not into sports, and my son was. And just getting comfortable, doing everything for them, making sure the food was on the table, making sure I cooked dinner. I'm not a morning person, so breakfast was on them and lunch was on them. Now I wouldn't get up at 12 o'clock in the afternoon or anything like that, but that was all on them when they're teenagers. So at the time they were teenagers, so they were older and they would be able to cook for themselves. But I always had dinner, ready for them to come and eat and stuff like that. And then, as they got older, over the age of 18, they did their own little thing here and there if they didn't want to, eat dinner or whatever. But again, going back to the topic of, being a single parent, doing things for your kids and putting your needs to the side and putting your stuff to the side and just, occupying your time with making sure that they were okay. And after a while, you kind of feel like you're unneeded. But then I had to change my mindset, because reality is that, you know what? You raise your kids so that they can go out into the world, right? You don't raise your kids so that they can stay home forever. And so I kind of had to learn how to deal with that situation and my emotions and kind of put myself into check, and say, you know what? It's time for you to let go. It's time for you to let them spread their wings. Let them do what they need to do and, live their life. I am very grateful that I, as a parent, made sure that they were good, but I also wanted them to be able to experience things in life, right? I didn't want them to go out into this world and be naive to certain things. So, I was constantly talking to them about different things and, helping them through finances and things like that. Because me as a single parent, I've gotten in and out of debt 3 times. And that's going to be another subject. I'm not even going to go there because that's more like a shopping addiction that I've had. And I am working to curb that. So I'll go through steps in a different episode about, shopping and getting in and out of debt and not knowing how to deal with finances, budgeting, and things like that. So that'll be another episode. But anyway, those are things that, I've done to help them. So when they go out in the world, that they are not naive to any of those things, right? And so, again, it was a little hard on me. I felt like, what do I do with myself? How do I go about doing all these, doing things for myself? And what do I need to do for myself, right? Because you've held it off for so long, you've put it out of the way for so long, you're like, okay, well, what do I do? So instead of me, sitting down and getting depressed, and like I said, I did feel like, oh man, I guess I felt a little sad. Like, oh, I'm here by myself, nobody's around but my dog, who just lays around and does nothing. But I said, okay, what are you going to do with yourself? What are you going to do to occupy your time? What are you going to do for you, right? And so what I started to do was I started to focus a little bit more on my side hustle, besides my job, right? And then I started going out. But then I started going out. I started hanging out Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And if you've been there, let me know. Anyway, um, I was taking it to the next level like a crazy person. Just like, okay, I'm partying all the way to 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning on Friday. Then going out on Saturday again to 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And then Sunday going out. And obviously getting home early because I had to work on Monday, right? And then I said, wait a minute. Wait 1 minute. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you wasting money on, okay, that's fine. Once in a while you go and you go for a happy hour with some girlfriends and you hang out and you chill. That's all fine and good. But 4 weekends in a row partying all the time, I was like, yeah, I'm not 20 anymore. I'm not gonna do this. So again, I started working on my side hustle. I started working on figuring out who I was, figuring out who I was without the kids, right? Because obviously they're grown, they're out the house. And I started to come to a realization that, you know what? I needed to sit back, think about what I wanted to do in the future now that I don't have little ones that are dependent on me, right? Because, obviously until they're 18 years old, basically or even 21, because some go to college and, they are a little codependent on you. Not as much as when they're little, under the age of, 12, and stuff like that. And even the teenage years, we always have to, talk to them and stuff like that because, even though they want to know it all, we know for a fact that they don't. And, we still have to be on top of them to give them the love. They're trying to figure themselves out and what they want to do with their lives and stuff like that. So, that's kind of where I was. Like if I was a teenager trying to figure out what I want to do with life. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to figure out what I wanted to do with myself, what I wanted to do with the future, and I'm grateful that, I am still working one of my side hustles. I've actually started another side hustle and I am doing this podcast. So, it was something that I felt like I needed to do, something that I needed to discover myself by myself, right? Because with my relationship, it was very hard. It was a very difficult breakup because it was something that happened. Yes, it was, there were little red flags here and there. But then there was also me kind of losing myself a little bit. And I guess God was like, yeah, I'm going to take everything away from you so that you can rediscover yourself. You can rediscover who you are, what you are, and what you are here for, right? Because only God knows what our purpose is here on life, in life. And, if we keep focus, we'll eventually figure out the things that we're here for, right? So I sat down with myself. I started talking to myself. Yes, talking to myself. What do you want out of life? What do you want to do? How do you want to resolve this situation? What other things are you focused on? And so little by little over the time, I got accustomed to coming home and being by myself and being okay with that. And being okay with just sitting down for an hour and just saying, okay, I just need some me time to sit down here and just relax. Sometimes we work all day and we're in that hurry, in that rat race that we forget to sit down and just say, you know what, I just need to sit here and relax. And I still have a habit of sitting down on the sofa and still doing things, working on my social media content, working on, doing this, doing that, a whole bunch of list of things. And I have to check myself sometimes, because it's not an easy task. But anyway, for those of you who are empty nesters and who are single at home and don't know what to do with yourself, take some time and write down things that you want to accomplish in life, right? Take some time to think about what makes you happy. Take some time to think about what would it be like if you had, let's say, you were preparing for your dream vacation. What would happen if you took the time to say, you know what, I'm just going to pick up today and I'm going to go to the beach and hang out there. Or, an unexpected, unplanned vacation. Just say, you know what, today is Friday. I'm going to go to whatever, drive an hour away from where you live at now. And just stay the weekend there. Go and look at the view. Go and check out new places in your state, out of your state. Whatever it is that you need to do, go and do it. Don't waste time worrying about you being home alone, because you have to love yourself enough to be in your own space. I'm going to say that again. You have to love yourself enough to be in your own space, by yourself, with yourself. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And if you feel like you have an issue with dealing with being by yourself or being with yourself, then maybe go for therapy. A lot of people have an issue with therapy, and I think that therapy is a good thing. You get to talk about your feelings. You get to analyze what is going on, and you get to decide what you're going to do about it, right? And so, take some time. Take some time to analyze what you want to do with yourself and enjoy it. Enjoy it. Right now, my spouse and I got back together. We've been together, I think, 3.5 years after the breakup. And sometimes we just pick up and say, okay, we're going to go away for the weekend. And obviously with COVID, we're not traveling very far, right? But, there's places that we can drive to within 5-hour drive or, 3-hour drive, 2-hour drive. And we'll go and we'll do that. There's times that we'll just pick up and say, you know what? No cooking tonight. Let's go out to dinner, and not that we didn't do that with the kids, because we did that as well. However, just me and him time, talking and cracking up and talking about our day and stupid things that happen and funny things that happen. And so, it's fun. And then I also have a grandson, and I enjoy him too. And I get to send him back home. I get to see him, I get to play with him, and then I get to send him back to his mama. But seriously though, don't overthink things. Just analyze where you want to be and know that there is a purpose for you. And you are still here because God still needs you here. So again, just focus on what's important. Focus on things that you want to do. Make a bucket list, right? Why not? Just make a bucket list and decide what you want to do first on that bucket list. Make sure that you take some time to enjoy every moment. Take some time to appreciate the things that you currently have. Because right now with this pandemic, that alone has taught us that tomorrow is not promised. We never know what's going to happen. And every morning, just be grateful. Be grateful that you're able to open up your eyes. Be grateful that you're able to live another day. Because again, tomorrow is not promised. So take some time to enjoy yourself. Take some time to recreate yourself. Take some time to just be yourself. And take the time to enjoy yourself by yourself. Anyway, guys, again, thank you for joining me today on this podcast. I am so happy that you are here and listening. I hope that you have a wonderful week and that you are blessed beyond measures. Bye.